The Blackhawks were the worst team in 2006. They were original six team that only won 2 cups. And they were regarded as the worst franchise in NHL history. But that all changed from 2 players. In 2006, after having a horrible season, they got the 3rd overall pick. And with that,
pick for the Hawks.
From the University of North Dakota, Jonathan Toews.
Now Jonathan Toews didn't start in the NHL. But before even Jonathan Toews, they were already building something. They grabbed a really late player in Duncan Keith in 2002, who was already showing how he could be a Norris caliber player. Then in 2003, with the 16th overall pick, they selected another D-man in Brent Seabrook, and also having Dustin Byfuglien on their team too after that 2003 draft. This team is young and energetic. Yet, they were still the worst team in 2007. And then, they got the 1st overall pick, where they selected U.S. player.
This historic pick, the first time ever the Chicago Blackhawks have had the 1st pick, and we proudly select from the London Knights, the Ontario Hockey League, Patrick Kane.
But there was a lot of doubts about Patrick Kane at this time. Yes, he was a good playmaker and could definitely use his hands for something dominant, but he was also really small. So then the 2008 and 2009 season started. And Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews from the past year were already so dominant. Patrick Kane won the Calder as the best rookie for his class, while second was Jonathan Toews. But they were just too young as they lost in the Western Conference Finals against the Detroit Red Wings. But no one saw this bad as they had some young goaltender prospect named Corey Crawford. The next year, they made the playoffs again. In the 2010 season, they made it back to the postseason, where they made it all the way to the Stanley Cup Final versus the Philadelphia Flyers. It was Game 6 in Philly, and it went to overtime. As it was in overtime, Patrick Kane got the puck. He went all the way down to the goalie line and took a shot. That shot magically went in as the golden goal that no one knew went in. Only Patrick Kane knew that went in as he went down the entire ice to his goaltender. As in 2010, they won the Stanley Cup, as they were the greatest team in hockey that year. And this team was still incredibly young. Again, I think Kane was only like 21. But then a little bit of a collapse happened, which made everyone think that this team couldn't be a dynasty. They lost against the Vancouver Canucks in 7 games. That wasn't the worst, as Vancouver was the best team in the regular season. But then the next year they lost the Arizona Coyotes. But it wasn't neutrally their fault, as Mike Smith was godly in that series. But it put doubt on the Chicago players, as can they actually go back to the Stanley Cup Final? Then the lockout 2012-2013 season happened, and they exploded. They were the best team in the regular season, winning the President's Trophy. In the Western Conference Finals, they had to verse against their opponent in the LA Kings. Now, LA won a cup in 2012. And they also had young players like Drew Doughty and Jonathan Quick. And this series was magical as it went all the way to Game 6 overtime, where Toews and Kane were sprung on a 2-on-1. After that, Toews passed the puck right to Kane, who took a slapper and hit bar down. He got a hat trick that game as he hit the famous Sully the Heartbreaker. As they made it to the finals, they versed the Boston Bruins, who was already rooting for something. After the big shooting that happened at the Boston Marathon, the Bruins were expected to go all the way and win the Stanley Cup as they made it to the finals. And it was Game 6, and the Bruins were up 2-1. And they pulled their goaltender in Corey Crawford. But then magic happened, as the Blackhawks would score a goal to tie the game up. Everyone was ready for a Game 7, but no one was ready for this. In a matter of 17 seconds, Duncan Keith took a shot that hit the post and Tuukka Rask can save it. After it hit the post, it bounced right to Boland's stick, and Boland tipped it in. On his celebration when he was trying to get out, he dropped his gloves, signaling that they had won the Stanley Cup pretty much. And in a matter of 4 years, Chicago had won 2 cups. They were the 2-time Stanley Cup champion, as before Jonathan Toews took the Conn Smythe. This year it was Patrick Kane. The next season, they will make it back to the postseason, where they found the revenge Los Angeles Kings, who took them out. Then the Kings won the Stanley Cup, becoming a 2-time Stanley Cup champions. The next year, though, they weren't done, as they made it back to the Stanley Cup Finals in 2015. They versed a young, inexperienced Tampa team, and they beat this Tampa team in 6 games, as they were the 3-time Stanley Cup champion and were so good in that short span. And then they kind of fell off, losing key players like Brandon Saad to salary cap issues. Hold up, just a Coke break. But then they had this great player in Artemi Panarin, who was a perfect match with Patrick Kane, and beat Connor McDavid for the Calder Trophy. But they found, again, salary cap issues, and they had Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews making $10 million. So they traded Artemi Panarin back for Brendan Saad, and then they lost Brendan Saad to free agency a few years later. And then this team plummeted after 2 first-round exits in 2016 and 2017 against the Blues and their opponents in the Nashville Predators. The dynasty sadly ended. The last time they made it in the playoffs is they lost in the first round of the 2020 to 2021 Stanley Cup playoffs, and have never been back. Why did the dynasty end so quickly? Well, one reason is back in 2010, they acquired Marian Hossa, who was a great addition. But right after 2016 and the 2017 season, he got something wrong with his skin and he could never play an NHL game again. And Patrick Sharp and Brent Seabrook were also slowing down in production. Same with Toews, honestly. Kane was still pretty good though. And Duncan Keith was also declining as well, as they traded away Duncan Keith to the Edmonton Oilers to give him one last shot to win the Stanley Cup. They traded away Corey Crawford, or in free agency lost him, as they gave him a stupid deal and he just signed with the New Jersey Devils, where he retired not even starting the first season with their team. They decided not to extend Jonathan Toews after his $10 million contract expired. They lost Brent Seabrook to Tampa as they traded him away. They lost Patrick Sharp in free agency. And maybe the one that kicks the most is that they traded away Patrick Kane to the New York Rangers to give him one last shot at the Stanley Cup. As this team is in full rebuild mode now after getting the 2023 first overall pick and high franchise player in Connor Bedard. They do have young other players, as they traded away Seth Jones for Spencer Knight, who is a great young elite goaltender, and got Levzhinov and Nazar. And this year they just got Anton Frondell. But in my opinion, even with this huge young core, I don't think they're ever going to be as good as their dynasty days. And you know, aging sucks, but you have to get through with it. But they are regarded as the only modern day dynasty in the entire NHL. Anyway, that's it for today. Bye-bye.